Welcome back. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Laura DeNooyer, and I'm going to continue reading from A Week with Mr. Baum. We started this story last week. It is from Oziana 2021. The last thing that happened was that Janie's mom and dad threw her Oz book into the fireplace. And now we are up to Wednesday. The next day, Janie's parents spent the day with friends. Aunt Sophie, who lived nearby, came to watch her. Janie told her aunt about meeting the Baums, being called Charlotte, climbing the dune, and, in tears, the book burning. Aunt Sophie's face fell. Oh, little dumpling, I'm so sorry about your book. She hugged her. I know how your mother is. It's so distressing. Choking on sobs, Janie sniffed. His Oz extravaganza has fared well for 2 years. He just published another book. Really? But Janie deflated. I won't be allowed to have one. I'm allowed. You'll read at my house. Auntie planted a kiss on her forehead. Thank you, Janie smiled, then pouted. Mr. Baum invited me back today, but say no more. If your parents forbade you, it's best I'm ignorant. Aunt Sophie donned her hat. Perhaps I should meet the neighbors. Come along. Janie's mouth dropped open. Honestly? Auntie took her hand. Our secret. Don't tell mother burned the book. Of course not, Cream Puff. Or is it Charlotte? They walked to the Baums. A tarp covered the porch floor. Apron clad with rolled up sleeves, Mr. Baum stood over a black iron contraption on the table, surrounded by ink bottles, papers, and a tray with compartments over a faded tablecloth. His cigar rested on a saucer. Welcome! His hands were dark with ink. Janie introduced Auntie while peering behind him at the curious items. Harry and Kenneth will be along soon, Charlotte. The boys left with bows and arrows, but perhaps got waylaid by bandits. He winked. They know how to handle themselves, so I'm not worried. Now choose one of these engraved pictures and a poem. Janie viewed numerous metal plates with images of flowers or animals. She picked a chicken and paged through Mr. Baum's Father Goose, his book. What are you making, Mr. Baum? Better yet, what are we making? He handed her a paint-splotched apron, which Aunt Sophie tied behind her. We're creating pages and typesetting a poem engraving for a book of your own. Oh, she relished the notion. He slipped the chicken engraving into a metal frame. This is called a chase. The image goes in just so. He handed her a slim metal rod. This key tightens shape so nothing slips or expands. Janie turned the key in the slot. Good. We'll do one for now until we add letters. Did you find a poem? I love these, Mr. Baum, but can we use the Good Witch's line? You must walk. It's a long journey. Definitely. Help me find letters. He pointed to the tray, each section filled with tiny metal figures, symbols, and punctuation. Mrs. Baum appeared bearing a tray of glasses and a pitcher. Janie made more introductions. Mrs. Baum poured lemonade and invited Aunt Sophie in. At the door, she shook her finger. Frank, I'd better not find one tiny ink spot on my porch or table. He snickered. Fear not, Maud. I have tarps laid so thick not even an elephant could gnaw through them. Janie giggled. Or a cowardly lion? She hoped she didn't bump letters or spill paint, incurring Mrs. Baum's wrath. Is this how people make books? It's a smaller version of what publishers use, similar to mine at age 14. He set down the letters J and K. My brother Harry and I printed several newsletters. He handed her a 4-page paper, the Rose Lawn Home Journal. Rose Lawn was our family property. Twittering, Janie read through riddles, jokes, and poems. He tapped the cigar. My sister, Mary Louise, created a Rose Lawn alphabet. Each letter stood for something in our household. Have you made an ABC book for the Macatawa Resort? Only an Army and Navy alphabet. Perhaps you should create the Macatawa ABCs. He set down 4 T's. Janie knew 2 of the words, H and K, for the Baum boys. Can we make one today? He arranged the last word, right after this one. After they sorted letters, He had her set them backwards in reverse order on the typestick, put it into the metal frame with other metal blocks, and tighten pieces together with the key. How different life would be if she could build, paint, or draw at home without judgment. Her parents would never buy a printing press. Projects were done in secret at Aunt Sophie's. Doll houses, wallpaper fans. Your parents didn't mind your making newsletters? They encouraged my literary interest, though my father hoped I'd have a mind for business too, he smirked. My parents want me to get better grades, especially in arithmetic, but I'm not very good in schoolwork. Learning goes beyond arithmetic and textbooks, my dear. Remember what the wizard told the scarecrow? Only experience brings knowledge, and today you're having a new one. She smiled. What's the first book you wrote? A book about chickens. Now pick a color. She chose yellow. He guided her in applying a golden blob of ink on the metal plate. Her hand shook. This was trickier than touching Kodak buttons. What if she dropped ink? Mrs. Baum would be furious. He let her use the foot pedal to see how ink coated moving rollers. Tentatively, she pressed the pedal. What if it broke? She cringed. You broke my good china. He operated it, showing her how to feed paper to the machine, one at a time. Her mother's voice cackled in her head. Useless. In her own world again. They printed a dozen and set them aside to dry, a vibrant row of chickens. No spills, thank goodness. As papers dried, she admired the detailed feathers. What was your chicken story about, Mr. Baum? It was a pamphlet called The Book of the Hamburgs about managing Hamburg chickens. My father, brother, and I read them. You must love chickens. We had fancy roosters and hens, developed new strains, and won prizes all over the county. So yes, I have a fondness for our fair, foul-feathered friends. He sniggered at his pun, waving his cigar with a flourish. Wonderful alliteration, Mr. Baum. She learned the word last year in 4th grade. Can we make the ABCs now? Absolutely. Mix and match letters as you please. He emptied the typestick, washed ink off the plates and rollers, and stacked dried papers. Janie bent over the printer tray, inspected styles and sizes, and settled on a pleasing arrangement. They filled the typestick, turning letters vertically, 6 to a page, leaving room for handwritten words. She selected blue and carefully dotted ink on the plate. Again, he operated the foot pedal and guided her trembling hand as she inserted and withdrew pages. Toward the end, her hand steadied. Taking the last print, she bumped the table. An open jar of blue ink crashed onto the floor, forming a blue puddle on the tarp. Oh no! Janie gasped, covering her face. Her mother's voice barked. You're nothing but trouble. Wailing, she sunk to her hands and knees. I'm so sorry. I'll clean it up. I promise. Tears blinded her. Wicked girl. You make a fool of me every day. Charlotte, get up. Mr. Baum's kind voice wound through her head like a foghorn. Her body shook with sobs. I'm sorry. Please get up, dear. No harm done. His hand on her back jarred her. She flinched. He called for her aunt. Aunt Sophie bustled out the door. What happened? She pulled Janie into a hug, sobs smothering in her chest. There now, sweet dumpling. Janie's voice was ragged, shoulders shaking. Mrs. Baum will be so angry, Mr. Baum explained, ending with, it was merely an accident. Aunt Sophie shook her head. Her mother punishes her severely for messes of any kind, accidental or not. Mr. Baum frowned. Well, I'll clean up in a jiffy and we'll start over fresh. Mrs. Baum stepped out, staring at the blue splotch. A good thing you laid this tarp, Aleph, so thick an elephant can't gnaw through it. She went to Janie with a glass of water and patted her wet cheeks with a handkerchief. Janie's crying reduced to sniffles. Mr. Baum led Janie to the table and handed her the dried pages. Time to make your ABCs. He took the printing press inside and cleaned up as she listed words. B could be Baum, Black Lake, Blackbird Pie, Boardwalk, or Boat. F could be Father Goose. L could be Lake Michigan, Lighthouse, or Lemonade. Upon his return, he refilled lemonade glasses. Have another dose of ozone with us, Miss Bannon. Aunt Sophie sat. Thank you. Congratulations on the success of your Wizard of Oz extravaganza. You must be pleased and pleasantly surprised, but it has little to do with me. The play is like a plum pudding, combining flavors of many contributors, including comedians David Montgomery and Fred Stone. Nobody could do better as the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman. He puffed on his cigar. Janie watched smoke rise like fairy clouds. Did you like seeing your characters alive on stage? C for cigar or clouds, S for sand, H for harbor. It's most gratifying, but other than Dorothy, the Scarecrow, and Ted Woodman, there's not much left of my original story. What was different? Janie wrote S for Scarecrow, Tin for Tin Woodman. The Wicked Witch of the West vanished. The Cowardly Lion's role is meager. The wizard became a Dutch comedian, then an Irishman. Instead of Toto, Dorothy's companion is Imogene the cow, a man in costume. Janie giggled at the atrocious thought. I for Imogene, C for Cowardly Lion, T for Toto. Did you have any say-so? Aunt Sophie inquired. Not much. Mr. Mitchell completely rewrote the scripts with new characters and incidents. He explained additions. What about Glinda? G for Glinda, W for Wizard, Wicked Witch of the West. She's present, though different from the book. They discussed its adaptation to stage. In conclusion, Mr. Baum sighed. I was anxious about such drastic changes, but had to trust Mr. Mitchell's experience. I'd have saved myself much anguish by trusting him sooner. There are challenges enough. Janie walked over and touched his arm. You must walk, Mr. Baum. It is a long journey through a country that is sometimes pleasant and sometimes dark and terrible. His eyes crinkled in amusement as he gave a throaty chuckle. So true, Miss Charlotte, a perfect reminder. Is this where you wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz? He pointed to the typewriter. Some I wrote at our rental cottage. Most was written in Chicago. Janie envisioned Dorothy, Toto, and her friends streaming from Mr. Baum's paper as he penned the tale. I worked on the enchanted island of You and my Santa Claus legend here. Janie's parents would throw the Santa book into the fire too, proclaiming Santa a fake, a usurper, a lie from the devil. Aunt Sophie scanned the lake. I'd be hard-pressed thinking about Santa in winter while sitting on this porch in July overlooking the beach. It's not such a stretch as it seems, Miss McKinnon. Though Makatawa Park is the most beautiful summer fairyland, snowflakes are just as clearly in my head as those sand piles you pass strolling the boardwalk. Munchkin country is no farther than the shore. Janie believed it. Her gaze meandered over treetops. Good hiding places for fairies? On the ABC pages, she wrote Enchanted Island, You, Santa, Waves, Wakazoo Trail. D for Dorothy. Will you write another Dorothy story? Mr. Baum sipped lemonade. The sign of the gooseplack swayed in the breeze. So many children ask. Janie scooted forward. So will you write one? He examined his cigar. Since finishing The Marvelous Land of Oz, I haven't heard any news from Oz. Janie glanced at Auntie, hoping she'd note the title for a Christmas gift. Is Dorothy in it? No, but there is plenty to delight. I can't wait to read it. She set down her pencil. Since Dorothy lives on a farm, she has animal companions. First Toto, then Imogene the cow. What about a chicken friend? Mr. Baum smiled as she continued. You know so much about chickens, especially those Hamburgs. She offered Aunt Sophie a smug look as if possessing secret information. It makes perfect sense that Dorothy likes chickens. He picked up his glass. Perfect sense. Yes. Are you thinking about it, Mr. Baum? Aunt Sophie frowned. Don't pester. Oh, she's hardly pestering, ma'am. All questions are welcome. She's forcing me to think. Pestering involves dumping sand in my shoes or hiding my cigars. Aunt Sophie murmured to her niece. Better to err on the side of caution. Honestly, I have trouble with that statement. If I lived that way, there'd be no Father Goose, no Oz, no Makatawa Park. He eyed Janie. It's risky letting your imagination run free. but it's necessary. Confused, Janie blinked. Necessary? He shook his cigar, ashes drifting to the floor. One can't be too cautious, though living with fairies takes a different kind of courage than jumping down dunes. Ah, she knew all about that, especially at home. D for dune, F for fairy, B for brownies, R for will, E for elves. He gestured to the goose sign. Let me take a gander. He examined her list. Splendid. Remember C for camera. Soon he sent her home with a stack of paper and a box of Crayola crayons. Later, after swimming with her aunt, Janie made alliterative sentences and crayoned illustrations for the Makatawa ABCs. She must finish before her parents arrived. At supper time, Mother noticed rock streaks on the kitchen table. What a mess! You waste more time on worthless tasks. Did you practice your multiplication tables? No. How will you catch up with your classmates? No more crayons for you. That night, Janie wept in bed. The only way her mother would like her was if she were someone else. Mr. Baum's words spiraled through her. Living with fairies takes a different kind of courage than jumping down dunes. Have that much courage? Thursday. Aunt Sophie took Janie to the Baums again, as planned. Janie handed him her Makatawa ABCs. He reveled in the booklet, commenting on each page. Then she and Mr. Baum made dioramas from odds and ends similar to showcase windows he used to design. He showed her several magazines featuring them. At noon, Mrs. Baum invited Janie and Auntie for dinner. Aunt Sophie ran an errand, but Janie stayed. Inside, a stained glass goose in green glass sparkled like emeralds in the parlor window. Stenciled keys flew from corner to corner against a grass-colored wall. Kenneth said his father made the furniture. Janie fingered the painted outlines of peace in the oak rocking chair. Brass goose had nails on leather upholstery, as adept with wood as with words. In the kitchen, Mrs. Baum set out plates of thick rye bread and slices with cheese sauce dripping down the edges. Mr. Baum unfolded his napkin. Ah, my favorite meal. Nothing but cheese-topped bread? It's Welsh rarebit, Harry said. Welsh rabbit? Janie frowned. Where's the meat? Mr. Baum and the boys laughed. Harry explained, it's rarebit. The dish was created in a place where rabbits were scarce, so it takes the place of rabbit. Janie's perplexity didn't seem to bother them. If you've never had it, Kenneth said, consider it a Hyperudin rostratus. What? She'd never like it now. Hyperudin rostratus. Mr. Baum wiped his chin with a napkin already streaked with yellow sauce. That is what one says when finding oneself in new surroundings. Mrs. Baum passed the carrots. It's the Latin name for the bottlenose whale. There's one in the Chicago's Columbian Museum from the World's Fair. What does that have to do with Welsh rarebit? Janie asked. It's a word we use for anything mysterious or strange, Kenneth said. It's the name we gave the rental cottage our first year here, Harry added. So different here from Chicago. But now we call our cottage the sign of the goose, for obvious reasons. Kenneth ladled more sauce on bread. What was all this table talk? When her family ate, only adults spoke. Children speaking was akin to trailing mud through the house. Dinner proceeded with lively chatter. Mr. Baum doled out riddles and puns with the carrots and celery. Janie's stomach hurt from laughing. That never happens at home. Kenneth nudged her. Papa can't tell a story without puns. Drives mother crazy. Janie smiled. I have a pun from one of my favorite authors. She lifted her hand with a flourish and dramatically cleared her throat. The scarecrow has a husky voice. They burst into laughter. For dessert, Mrs. Baum set out warm blueberry pie with a bowl of thick cream. Mr. Baum asked the children to name 3 objects. They suggested a seashell, a spool, and a magnet. He told a story that incorporated all 3, concluding with, after he swallowed the magnet, the boy grew hearty, attracting friends with his magnetic personality. Mrs. Baum groaned. Janie giggled. Harry and Kenneth exploded into fits of hilarity, holding out their hands. Mr. Baum pulled a dime from his pocket and held it over Harry's palm. Then Kenneth, going back and forth, producing louder guffaws, he finally dropped it into Harry's. Kenneth howled. Mrs. Baum rolled her eyes. Charlotte, we are outnumbered by 3 boys at this table. Humph. Frank, this tale's not much different from what you told that journalist. I worry about your stretching the truth so much. Kenneth whispered. He doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. Annie smiled. Her parents said the same thing about her. Maybe that's why she felt more at home here than with them. After dinner, Mr. Baum put fresh paper in the typewriter, inviting Janie to experiment. You can write about tea times with your fairy friends. Most people don't know anything about it. She'd never written a story before. Well, the fairies invited me to a very festive party once. What did they do? They danced around the fairy ring, playing Ring Around the Rosy, telling stories and drinking ginger ale. They drink ginger ale? I wonder what games they play. Lindsay, Beatrice always loses. She complains so much that Harriet hides in the lilac bush. When Beatrice can't find her, she's furious. Mr. Baum laughed. No wonder those 2 argue. How did you come up with the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman? It's hard to say. Characters are a combination of many influences, inspirations that strike unexpectedly at any given moment. They pop into your head with no warning? Yes, but perhaps they've percolated for a long time. Sounds like Mother made coffee. Yes, coffee goes through a process, leaving a delicious brew, but it takes time. Maybe that process of creating characters happens constantly without my awareness. Then suddenly I see them. Janie squinted, trying to see them herself. Do you see any chicken characters for Dorothy? He snickered. Not yet. Do story ideas pop into your head too? Not all at once. The plot and plan take longer to develop. So when you're writing, be patient. You can add more later as ideas come. Ideas already flitted, igniting her imagination, for he'd spoken as if he saw in her a story she'd not seen herself. He patted the typewriter. You'll need to use this someday as a teller of tantalizing tales. I knew it when I first learned about your fairy friends. Fairies caused trouble at home, but he spoke as if knowing fairies was a wonderful bit of serendipity. He lit another cigar. Experiment with the typewriter. Here's a pencil, too. Imagination's a fine place for characters to reside, but it's only the beginning. Start a story with your own fairies. How could a great storyteller like him be interested in her tales? Her father never let her touch his typewriter. Choose from sprites, elves, nymphs, rills, snooks, gnomes, brownies. A rill and a brownie, please. Very good. Now add 3 objects. First, an aeroplane. Those Wright brothers experiment with flight, but fairies get confused by them. The second object, a rabbit, Jeannie said, the Welsh rabbit's sister, or a chicken, either one. The third is a pinafore with a magic pocket. He rocked in the chair, writing on a clipboard while Janie plucked at typewriter keys. She typed her name and picked up the pencil to begin. Once upon a time. She wrote, amazed at how a string of words in her head could take shape on paper and sound better than if spoken. She couldn't tell stories aloud the way Mr. Baum did, but perhaps writing was a grander way for preserving words that would otherwise disappear in the atmosphere. He incorporated all 3 objects, plus a rill with 5 paint pots and a brownie who lived under the stairs. Smiling, Mr. Baum skimmed the story. Aunt Sophie walked up the steps. From her bag, she withdrew the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Mr. Baum, will you please re-sign Charlotte's book? The other one encountered an unfortunate accident. But nobody was hurt, Janie said. That was a lie. He took the book as Mrs. Baum stepped outside. Janie watched him write. Sweat glazed her forehead as if that fire flared nearby, but no more book burnings. Parents must be obeyed, but they can't interfere with fairies. When he handed it back, her voice wavered. Thank you. She clasped it to her chest. Now then, he said, tomorrow's your last day at Nakatawa. Come at 10 to conjure some theater magic. Has my girl behaved well? Auntie asked. She was delightful and very well mannered, Mrs. Baum replied. Most importantly, Mr. Baum said, she brought her imagination. I hope to see that story you started, Charlotte. Bring it along. Aunt Sophie faced her niece. You had a good day, Cream Puff? Janie grinned. As amazing as a Hyperudin Rostratus. At home, Janie asked Auntie to keep the book at her house. That evening in her bedroom, Janie finished the story. Friday. A jangle of boys' shouts ensued as Janie and Aunt Sophie approached the Baum's cottage Friday morning. What now? Janie's last day to see the Baums. With so much strictness and criticism at home, this week was like indulging in chocolate fudge after months of cold porridge. Harry, Kenneth, and 4 boys gathered around Mr. Baum. It's about time, Charlotte. We need General Ginger. Looking more 8 than 13, Kenneth wore a scrappy shirt stuck with straw. Hello, dear. Stand over there. Mr. Baum handed her a script and 2 knitting needles. Your weapons. You're marching as head of the girls' revolt. Revolting against what? Sweeping, dusting, cooking, and dishwashing. Harry wore an oversized vest, hardly looking his full 14 years. Against minding the children, too, Kenneth added. May I be Dorothy? She asked. No Dorothy this time, Mr. Baum said. You'll be Glinda. Flurry of activity bubbled as the children performed, some with double roles. Scenarios included the boy Tip bringing Jack Pumpkinhead and the Sawhorse to life, and meeting the pompous, highly magnified Wogglebug, thoroughly educated. Characters rode the flying dump constructed of cushions, branches for wings. Janie inadvertently laughed at puns while the boys groaned. Kenneth, staying in character as the Scarecrow, scolded that laughing wasn't in the script, while Harry, the highfalutin Wogglebug, insisted that puns displayed genius. After the revolt, Janie as General Ginger lounged with Queen's luxury, eating fudge made by girl soldiers in the palace kitchen. Amidst complaints, the boys mimicked sweeping, dusting, dishwashing, and pushing carriages. Mr. Baum placed a crown on Janie's head. Now you're Glinda, the good sorceress. Time to work your magic. After discovering that evil magic had transformed Ozma, the true ruler, into another form, Glinda stepped on a wooden crate, waving her wand. I never deal in transformations, for they're not honest. No respectable sorceress makes things appear to be what they're not. Only unscrupulous witches use the art. Jenny removed the crown to become Ginger, appalled to return to floor scrubbing and butter churning. The men cast off their aprons. The Scarecrow bowed to Janie, now Princess Ozma with a different crown. Bravo, Mr. Baum yelled. Aunt Sophie applauded. Mrs. Baum set out a plate of fresh-baked ginger cookies. Basking in the palace, Janie held her cookie pinky up the way Princess Ozma might. As commoners idolized her every move, she lifted her chin and nibbled. Boys romped around the porch, wolfing cookies, fancying herself as queen and famous actress. She viewed them smugly as her pitiful subjects. What if she became an actress? Mother would treat her differently. As a stage celebrity, she'd bloom as a vivid morning glory rather than a pale thistle. Classmates and teachers would take notice. She'd star in an extravaganza, adoring fans arriving in droves to watch her perform. Her Royal Highness, Annabella Esmeralda. She took another dainty nibble, as sweet and light as English trifle, and lifted her glass. She'd be sorry to see the neighbors leave, losing her entourage. A boy jostled her arm. Lemonade spilled on her lap. Sorry, Charlotte, I didn't see you. Narrowed her eyes. Didn't see her. Dare he? As lady in waiting, Mrs. Baum tied on a clean pinafore. Charlotte lifted her chin higher. Mr. Baum presented a book. Hot off the press. No waiting till Christmas. The story we just performed. Janie reached as if receiving a gift from a visiting dignitary. Her arms tingled with excitement as she held the marvelous land of Oz. Looking into his kindly face, she almost forgot she was queen. The next Oz story! Just for you. She almost hugged the book to her chest, but such a display was beneath her. Preparing for her future, she regally replied, "Thank you, Mr. Baum." He cocked his head in amusement. The dedication was to Fred Stone and David Montgomery, still touring with the Oz extravaganza. As simple Janie, the closest she'd get to seeing the production was viewing the book's end papers. But now, as queen and future renowned actress, it was necessary to attend. She stood straighter. Prolific drawings by John R. Neal blinked with color, irresistible to touch. Browsing, she invoked her most mature voice. Lovely pictures, but why didn't Mr. Denslow illustrate? It didn't work out. His voice had an edge. But Mr. Neal is a young, vigorous artist who will do justice to Oz. Janie pointed. This must be the Wogglebug, though no, most people never heard of one. He eyed her keenly, surely noting her pretension. The name came to me on the beach in Coronado when a little girl showed me a crab. Janie delicately turned pages. Her voice rang with authority. I'm so glad Glinda is in it, but you called her a sorceress, not a witch. Mr. Baum's eyes widened, most likely at her uncharacteristic tone. Our friends needed her magical help. With too many negative connotations for witches, she's better suited as a sorceress. Janie nodded as if approving his best royal political strategy. But the royal parents wouldn't approve of sorcery either. Acting is an exhilarating escape to imagination, isn't it? He set down his cigar. And illusions are fine for stage, but trying to be someone else off stage is another thing entirely. Shape-shifting and deception are one of sorcery's darker arts. His gaze intensified, his voice kind. You read her lines well, Charlotte. Even Glinda, with all her magic, will not change into a different form, nor change somebody else. She realizes it's important not to try to be something you're not. He set a hand on her shoulder, as if delivering Glinda's message solely for her benefit. Conversely, it's vital to be content as yourself, and you are one of the brightest, most imaginative girls I know. His touch strengthened her. Instantly, the famous actress queen, Annabella Esmeralda, vanished with the strike of a magic wand, like dandelion seeds disappearing into the wind with one puff. You can't be someone else to escape being yourself. And why should you? You're an engaging story writer. Your journalistic skills rival none. If I had $1 for every thoughtful question you asked, I'd have the riches of Ozma. At that moment, with him, she was happy to be herself, queen or not. Why did you write the play? If she was good at asking questions, that's what she'd do. To turn it into another extravaganza. My new publisher is already planning the promotion. Here, he dropped a round yellow pin into her hand. She read the button. What does the Wogglebug say? In September, folks will wear these buttons everywhere. A newspaper Wogglebug contest in comics will promote this book and the extravaganza. He pulled a folded paper from under the typewriter. All the news from Oz in this official newspaper, the Ozmopolitan. Janie eagerly scanned Ozian headlines. A swell dinner. Farewell to Ginger. Edited by H.M. Wogglebug, T.E. How exciting! Mr. Baum lit a new cigar from his old one. Did you finish your story? She fished a manila envelope from her satchel. Smoking, he read her 3-page tale while Janie read the Ozmopolitan, glancing at him periodically. During their discussion, Janie pouted. The action didn't go as I'd planned. Mr. Baum tapped the papers. If I've learned one thing about telling the stories of such obstinate characters, it's that you must let them do as they please. So how do I decide if Beatrice or Harriet should play the trick on Maxwell? Consider their idiosyncrasies, Mr. Baum said. Each has his own habits and concerns. The Wogglebug considers himself a real crackerjack. He constantly shows off his education, prodigious vocabulary, and facility with puns. Whatever spews from his mouth reflects that. That's why he doesn't get along with folks, Janie said. And his solution to problems will be Jim Dandy. According to him, Janie crossed her arms. Right, Mr. Baum shrugged. What else matters to a wogglebug? I see. I have an idea. The Osmopolitan caught her attention again. Maybe it's time for me to write a fairy newspaper, too, with the news about Fairy Chasm, where Harriet and Beatrice live. Late afternoon, when time to leave, Mr. Baum handed Janie a box. More paper to fill with inspirations. I look forward to reading them. My address is in here. This will keep me busy all year, Janie said. Thank you. He dropped an object into her cupped hands, a flat wooden silver shoe ornament. Like Dorothy's. I made this for your journey. You must walk, she chimed in. It is a long journey through a country that is sometimes pleasant and sometimes dark and terrible. May this shoe remind you of pleasant times here, helping you through dark times later. Remember, he said, like Dorothy's companions, you have all the brains, heart, and courage you need. She dangled the shoe by its ribbon. What a wonderful week. Running the printing press, making an ABC booklet, and performing a play. Kindness in exchange for spells. Newfound courage to jump down the dune, write a fairy adventure, and blossom as herself. At the Baum's dinner table, she felt the acceptance of a true home. Tears trickling, Janie embraced him. It's lovely. Thank you. He took her hand. Your journey is discovering more of the beauty within you. Never give up. Remember what Glinda says. Doesn't deal in transformations. Grasping the shoe, she eyed her house next door and squared her shoulders. Yes, living with fairies took more courage than jumping down dunes, but she would do it. So be yourself, Charlotte. Make room for fun and fairies every day. What about you, Mr. Baum? Will you write another Oz book? He winked. No promises, but if Dorothy ever has a chicken friend, you'll get full credit. The end. I hope you enjoyed the story, A Week with Mr. Baum. Thank you for joining me today.